Hey everybody, welcome to Enhance Don't Distract, episode number 43. My name is Justin Edmonds, your host, and my co-host, as always, Jordo. So, yes, I've got a whole list of them, so like we're gonna go through them one by one every week. I'm not gonna tell you what they are until you hear them live here, so it's gonna be awesome. So today you're Jordo, and today we are talking about everything has an expiration date, but before then we should do our obligatory like gear corner thing, which Sean still hasn't made a song for. So do you have anything? Because I didn't come prepared for that. So
I know you're a big Milwaukee guy.
I am a big Milwaukee guy. Stuff. You can actually see the fan in the corner behind me here.
But one of the things I really do like that I'm just kind of a knife guy. I've always carried around a knife. But for a long times I was carrying around like pliers and big multi-tools, and they're just so bulky. I got this little Milwaukee like fast back knife. It's got a lock on here. It folds out. The clips on these things are amazing. I really do love. I think you're a big fan of these clips too.
The pocket clip.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like just with the wire. Like I break clips. I carry around pens all the time, and I bust clips.
Oh man, I bend things all the time. This is the one I carry in my pocket now, and as you can kind of see, like it's starting to wear down. But mine is not as cool as yours. Mine is just like the normal knife. But this is probably a year old, and that clip is in perfect condition.
Yep. So what Justin is telling, one of the things I love about this knife, I need more than just a knife. I want tools. This has got a bit on the end of it. Yeah. So it flips around for Phillips or flathead. It's pretty magnetized, as you can see. It's pretty strong.
Dude, is that just like a normal screwdriver? Could you replace that bit with something else?
Yeah. Dude. It's just a normal bit. There's a magnet in there, and it's got both sides. For so many of my things, I'm like, you don't need pliers. I need a screwdriver more than anything, or a flathead being able to pry stuff. This is the Milwaukee Fast Fold. It's got safeties on it. It's really robust. It's got a can opener. It's got serrated and a flat edge, and kind of just a nice little blade, lanyard hole.
Yeah. I agree. For the longest time, like I felt like because everyone in our industry carried like a Leatherman style multi-tool.
Right.
But I tried doing that for a while, and it was like I really didn't feel like I used a lot of the tools all the time. It was like really cumbersome to get into my knife and all those kind of things. And it was like the knife was the thing that I used probably 99% of the time. Yep. And like you said, so having like a nice little screwdriver on there, like especially like if I'm visiting a client for the first time and I just want to see something, like I can just pop that out and like, oh, there's a loose screw. Let's like just tighten that down a little bit. So I think that it's like this seems really simple and kind of silly to like be kind of talking about this in Gear Corner, but it's like, man, that is probably the tool I use the most besides my cell phone, It's like,
and because you carry it on you, and because it's like pretty small. I mean, this is good size. Like it's good size. But it just now, when you always have it and you can use it. And I end up using it a lot as well. So.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. My wife, when I forget my pocket knife and she's like, I hate you without a knife.
I'm like, she doesn't steal it and start using it for stuff, or?
Well, I mean, right before we left for Florida, she was trying to cut tags off of clothes and she cut her knuckle off.
That's not good.
Like literally cut it off. Had to go to the emergency room. Had to get it stitched back on. Like literally the night before we got on the plane. Oh man. It was pretty epic. It was like ironic because I just sharpened my knife too.
Yep.
It was like,
Again, let us know in the comments. What do you carry? What is your knife? What is your go-to knife? Have you tried the Milwaukee Fastback? By the way, they're only like $25, which is like a deal. I feel like.
Yeah, they have a couple different versions. Like I have just like the normal pocket knife, right? That you can get at like Home Depot or anywhere that carries Milwaukee stuff. But yeah, they have. I think Sean carries like I don't know what they call it. It's like the curved blade. One, so he's got that one. I think he bought it on accident and just kind of stuck with it, and kind of really likes it. But I don't know. There's a bunch of different versions of it, which is pretty cool. So
but let us know what you carry. The worst is always
put it in the comments.
or going into somewhere where they're metal detectors. And yeah, I've got some crazy stories about leaving it outside of places. So leave your story as well. Where's the craziest place you've left your knife that so you didn't lose it? So
nice. All right, cool. That's great. I think that was good. What do we got for a topic today is everything has an expiration date. You want to like kind of fill us in what that means and kind of go from there?
Right. We've all, hopefully you know this by now, like some of the technologies we're using, the equipment, some will not last forever. Some will last forever. But everything really does have an expiration date, whether that is like a full life of functionality or not being so far beyond and behind an advancement or an upgrade. And I'm not saying you need to chase it every single upgrade, but like, hey, if you're still doing standard def, we need to have a conversation. Move that industry wide changes like that. We want to be up on things like that. So everything has an expiration date, but also this is really critical when we start talking about budgeting and planning, because some of our gear, especially like a PA, which might have a shelf life, which we'll talk to about in a little bit, like that's a big expense. So we got to be able to lead up and help our leadership understand, hey, these expenses are coming. So Justin, maybe we start with that. Like, just what about PAs, speaker systems? What's kind of the expiration date on those?
Yeah. So can I add a little bit to kind of like why so this is a topic that me and my buddy Gary talked about, and we actually made a video about this a long time ago. And it was like, he helped me kind of like put together into words what my thought process already was, which was really fun. And I think to add to that expiration date thought process is like, he made a comment about how like, like your milk in your refrigerator has an expiration date. Yeah. And what does that mean? That doesn't mean it's just outdated. It means that it's bad. Don't drink it, right? It's going to make you sick. It's going to fall apart, right? And I think that the equivalent to that is even failing equipment, right? Not just, hey, we're in standard definition, we need to be in high definition, or we're in HD and we need to be in 4K, right? I think that both of those play in there. And I think that what I see personally is more of the churches letting equipment get to the point of failure before they get it replaced, or before they even consider trying to save any money or anything like that. So, I just wanted to kind of add that caveat in there and give Gary credit too. So, So, I mean, to answer your question, I think that everything there's a lot that goes into figuring out the expiration date of your equipment. I think first off is environment, right? And environment kind of entails a couple different things in my head. And chime in, Jordan, if you feel like there's more to add to this part. I think you have some churches that do things very differently, right? You have some churches that will leave their air conditioning on all the time, keep the room really nice and like temperature controlled, right? Yep. Humidity is never really a factor because the AC is on during the summertime, and I've literally seen churches put humidifiers in their sanctuaries during the wintertime to try and keep the room nice and like level, right? So you have some churches that are using haze machines, right? Some churches are using water-based haze, some are using oil-based haze. That plays a role on the hardness of your equipment, right? Because everything's got a fan, it's all sucking in the air, and if it's full of oil-based haze, that can really gum up machines. So, then you have the environment. How is the power in the building, right? Is the grid that the church on, does it have constant power issues? Does it have brownouts all the time? Is it really stressed? Is it just really flaky? Those type of things. Is it in a high traffic area? Does it get struck by lightning a lot, right? There's a lot of those kind of things that kind of play in there. The next thing about environment would be, how is it being used, right? Are we using it to its full capacity all the time, right? And the reason why that's a part of the environment is, imagine you have a machine that, for simple sake, right, 1 to 100, right? 100 is at full capacity, 1 is that it's not being used, right? If I'm using an X32, which can do, 43 inputs or 42 inputs, if I'm only using an X32 for 12 inputs, right, I'm not using that at 100%, right? I'm using that at like maybe 30% because of effects and DCAs and stuff like that, right? But if I start using that I'm at all 42 channels, and every channel has a compressor, every channel has, effects of some sort, or, along those lines, right? And now you can audibly hear that console start to get worse and worse, because though it can do it, it can't really do it, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And when you use a computer at 100% capacity all the time, it wears on that, right?
Yep.
So I think all of those type of things play into it, right? And then you also just have time, right? Time kills everything, right?
Yep.
So I think environment's probably the biggest determining factor on how long your equipment's going to last.
Yeah. Another thing I would say is maintenance. This is a little tricky because you're not going to open up Blackmagic gear and do maintenance. But I do think,
the nice thing about a nice thing about like the BMD stuff is like all those converters and stuff that go in the rack all have air filtration now that go in one side and out the other.
Yep.
So as long as you're going in the right direction, can of air, getting some dust out of there.
Yep.
Dust kills things.
Yep, exactly. Because what we're really trying to do is avoid heat.
Yeah.
So if our fans are not working, or if the air inlets and outlets are not clogged up and stuff, that's going to just kill any equipment, any electronics. It hates heat.
I do this all the time. If your rack room is really gross and dirty, or just like the air intake, like I have a client, an IT client, that like the building's just really old, right? And it wasn't really maintained for a long time, and the HVAC system is not cleaned enough, type thing.
Yeah.
And this client bought the building a handful of years ago, and they just, there's been so many fixes and repairs that they're like, here's our list, right, of all the things, and we're just working our way down it. Yeah. And I'm like, let's throw an air purifier right next to this rack. And so it's like, that way at least it's trying to suck in some of the air before it gets to the IT equipment. And it's like the old IT equipment in that space was like literally caked, like hard caked with dust. And now the IT equipment that we put in there, that's been in there for about 2 years, it's got dust on it because, the atmosphere is just a dusty, thing. The HVAC, like I said, hasn't been super maintained yet. But like it looks pretty good with that air purifier in there. Okay. And we've done that with hotels, like when we're under construction, we're redoing rack rooms and stuff like that.
Yeah. And there's just a lot of stuff getting kicked up in the air.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's so much dust being just like flung everywhere. So we've definitely thrown air purifiers in rack rooms to like try and keep dust, as much as we possibly can. You're never going to completely control that kind of stuff, but there are some options like air purifiers. And then you can get like small ones from Home Depot that are like literally like the size of like those old Mac trash cans, and they run pretty quiet. And it's like, shut them off during service, right? Run them all week so that they're on, right? And then Sunday morning when you're getting ready to go, just shut them off so that it's quiet, and then turn them back on. You could put like 2 or 3 of those throughout a sound booth, to just try and, if your environment requires, needs that, right, type thought process. So.
Yeah. But also, using also like dust covers and stuff like that. There's a reason they ship with those, everybody.
Unless you're Ellen and Heath, then you have to buy them separately.
Okay, well, yeah. Ellen and Heath, let's go. Get on that.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to keep their price point down, so it's like we can say our console's under a certain dollar figure. Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about that. Let's talk about like how do we plan and save, maybe some of the financial end, start budgeting, even start having a conversation with our leadership, like, hey, we're gonna have this big expense coming up. How can people do that better?
Yeah. So I think to kind of tag on to the end there and then transition in this, I think that there's still an expiration date on things that can be kind of generically said. And this is not like a number of like, oh my gosh, like it's going to die on this day, right?
Yeah.
It's not like the truck, where it's like, oh, my transmission failed at 101,000 miles, right?
Right. Or the iPhone where there's software where it's like, oh yeah, no, you're now slower because we want you to upgrade.
Yeah.
If that actually happens or not.
Yeah, I think that I've kind of come up with what I've seen and what I've felt as like good rules of thumb, or
But yeah, what are those
suggestions? I think, and again, there's to put a caveat on the caveats I'm about to give. There's obviously differences depending on like the quality of equipment you buy, right?
Absolutely.
So keep that in mind. So like when a client says to me, "Hey, we want to replace our PA," and I say, "Okay, great." I'm like, let's talk about quality, right? Mm-hmm. And they say, well, what's the difference in quality? Well, usually quality comes in the physical sound quality, like the sonics, the capabilities, and then the longevity of it, right?
Yeah.
And there's obviously a bunch of other things that play into that, but those are the two big ones that most church people that are not AV related, right, want to know, right?
Yeah.
Is it going to sound good? How long is it going to last? Right. Most churches will say this is the one upgrade we're going to get for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, if that is the case, if that is genuinely the case, you do not want to buy a PA that's only going to last you 7 to 12 years.
Yep.
Right. Because what we see all the time, and Jordan, correct me if you haven't seen this, I see this all the time. The speakers have been blown for about 5 or 6 years. They haven't sounded quite right. Oh, it's because there's 5 drivers and 3 of them are dead, right? 2 of them are actually destroyed. One of them is like half destroyed, and the others are so fatigued that like it doesn't sound remotely what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah,
right?
as long as they are producing sound to some people's ears, they're fine as a daisy.
Right.
Keep going.
Yeah. So I think that like if you're buying like a mid-grade PA, somewhere in the lines of like the cheaper, more affordable. When I say cheap in these contexts, it's not like crappy cheap, like affordable cheap, right?
Yeah.
Like the JBL QSC kind of plastic boxes, paper cones. I think that depending on the environment that they live in, how they're used and how they're treated, you usually can get anywhere between 7 to 9 years. If you're lucky, 12. That's my opinion. That's what I've seen. As I've replaced destroyed versions of those speakers, they usually land in that 7 to 12 year range, right? How long ago they had been put in.
Yeah. And so you're even physically opening them up and examining them.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I don't really have to do that. Sometimes I can just run a sweep. And when you hear or like when you're running like tone through it, it's pretty obvious, like that's what that is.
That's problem frequency.
That's problem free. Dude, when we replaced the PA in the old sanctuary at the church we worked at, it would, I mean, I think it was put in like 1996 and it was like 2012 or 2013 when we went to replace it. We started trying to tune the PA because it sounded so bad.
Oh, okay.
And we started running tone through it, and we had the capability of muting each individual driver and each individual speaker. So it's like we were able to really localize, and it was literally sounded like there was an animal flapping its wings in some of the speakers. I think there was like 6 of them across the main, like the thing, because it was a huge room. It was like 1,700 people. And when we finally, because we didn't want to like get the lift in there, we were just trying to EQ it, right? Let's just make it sound better, right?
Yeah.
Then we were like, oh, we should probably get a lift in here. So like we pulled the lift in, pulled the cover off, and it was like the cone literally had disconnected. And so it was like the magnet was still pushing it. So it was like, it's just literally sounded like a bird was inside of the driver. So there's some obvious ways you can figure that kind of stuff out.
But really quick, one of the things I want to make sure that people are doing is every few years, maybe getting somebody in there and doing that sweep, just so you can even mark like, hey, this speaker is kind of going. Hey, this array has got some issues. Like just marking that, I think, and recording that can help leadership understand like, okay, cool. We now have issues with 25% of our PA. Hey, in a few years later, we might have issues with 50% of our PA. Like that helps makes your case for when the ask comes here. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you go to like a premium brand like L-Acoustics, Meyer, D&B, that kind of thing, you're obviously going to get a lot more life out of it because those PAs are more designed to get the crap kicked out of them on tours and stuff like that. Like, I mean, there's still VDOS being toured with, you know, that box came out in 1992 and I don't think it's been made since 2006 or something like that. Yeah. And it's still out on tours because it's just a beast. Right. And a lot of those premium brands will support their discontinued products for a lot longer than the other brands. Yeah. So like if drivers do fail, you can replace drivers instead of replacing the entire array. Yep. But yeah, I've discovered, again, the environment use case. Usually you can get between like 12 and 20 years out of a premium brand for PA. Yeah. And again, that comes into like the wear and tear and stuff.
So that's even like potentially double the lifespan.
Yeah.
So then we start looking at cost. Like we could potentially factor that in where it's like, hey, yes, this is double, but it potentially could last double.
Yeah. I think that there's a whole nother conversation about budgeting when we're designing PA that we could dive into, but we shouldn't do it right now. We should do it in another podcast.
Okay.
Because I have some examples of like, hey, I don't have money for an acoustic system. And that's what they ended up with because of blank things. So we can talk about that later. But yeah, longevity, you literally can get probably close to double the lifespan. And the reasons why you can get that is because there's usually the quality of the physical materials are better. Yep. The like, let's just take, because I'm really familiar with acoustics, right? Let's take them over, like, let's say like a JBL, like Vertec rig, right?
Yep.
You have JBL has a plastic box and paper woofer, right? Mm-hmm. L-Acoustics is not that, right? It's the complete opposite. It's wood and it is what's the material? It's I am drawing a blank.
I'm the video guy, so I don't. You know,
I'm drawing a blank. So sorry, I wasn't honestly.
It's like a synthetic material, right?
Yeah, it's a synthetic material. So the other thing is that like JBL allows you to buy their box without buying their amplifier, right? So they're opening a door for you to power it incorrectly, tune it incorrectly, and just drive it horribly wrong. Yep. L-Acoustics will not allow you to buy their speaker without buying their amplifier that has their presets built into it. And so when you go to place an order for, let's say, a A15 box, right? And you say, hey, I want this amplifier. And they go, hey, that amplifier won't power that correctly. You can't buy that amplifier. You have to buy this amplifier. So we won't sell you that speaker without you buying this amplifier. Right?
And it's a little annoying and frustrating, but they mean well. And they want to protect their
I don't find that annoying. I don't find that frustrating because I will tell you right now, even in the scenario that you're thinking of, a lot of those speakers are destroyed because the amplifiers were not done correctly.
Yeah.
So like in that scenario, they were all, and that was pre-L-Acoustics having their own amplifiers. So that whole system was driven by third-party amps that were not they're kind of crappy amps, and B, they didn't have any sort of profiles for those speakers or anything like that. I have never blown or destroyed an L-Acoustics rig that is on an L-Acoustics amplifier.
Okay.
Because they
That's
put it
another podcast episode.
Right, but it's because the quality that goes into that, the whole thought process, right? It's got a preset that says, I know what speaker's at the end of this line.
Right.
So
the amp is insulating the box.
Correct.
And protecting it and only giving it what it needs.
Yeah.
It's like a parent to a child.
Yeah. Now, is there obvious ways, like if you really wanted to like destroy, an acoustic speaker? Of course, even on an L-Acoustics amplifier. I have seen it. I have not done it, but I've seen people that don't know what they're doing.
But that's also where we go back to the environment.
Exactly.
Right?
The environment
is a key component there.
Right.
That will, because they can't factor for that. So.
Yeah. So I think that's those are the things that play into the longevity of a system like that over, like a JBL or a QSC type amplifier, like system like that. So there's safeties, those kind of things, ecosystem is what we call it in the industry. Because now we also don't run into, L-Acoustics going, well, what amplifier are you using? Oh, well, I have a PowerSoft amplifier. Oh, it's their fault. Go talk to them. They're the problem.
Right.
Oh, and then I call PowerSoft, and PowerSoft's like, oh, oh no, everything seems fine. I would call QSC. They're the ones doing the DSP. If L Acoustic says it's not them, then I would call QSC. Then you call QSC, and they're like, you know what? It's probably the amplifier. Well, they said it was you. Well, they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And now you have the Spider-Man meme
later. Yeah. Spider-Man meme. Right. Yeah, but 6 months later, you also still don't have a PA that works.
Exactly. Or a video system that works, or so on and so forth. So
yeah. All right. So we have talked about kind of what goes into making kind of equipment fail, some of the lifespan of things, and in general, like electronics too. Like we could probably say like 5 to 10 years or so. But again, be mindful of the technology cycles. And again, it just really depends on your environments. Mm-hmm. But let's talk a little bit about just like budgeting leading up. How do we get our leaders to wrap their minds around like, hey, this big expense is coming. We're going to need 6 figures for a PA. Yes, we already have a PA, but it's aging. How do we navigate that discussion?
Yeah, I think that there's 2 things that go into that in my head. The thought that I have is always why most people don't buy a car. Like, let's say you buy a brand new car.
Yeah.
You tend to not drive that car into the ground, and when you're done with that car, send it to the compactor, right? Mm-hmm. Some people do, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. But a majority of people do not. Mm-hmm. They will drive it until it gets to a point where you're like, maybe it's starting to need a little bit more repairs more often than you want to deal with, right?
Right.
But it's still a completely functional vehicle. It still has some value, right?
Reliability.
Or some reliability, right? And you're like, we should probably upgrade before this becomes a super big issue, right?
Or before you're on the side of the road.
Exactly. So then you sell that car, van, truck, whatever it is, for, obviously a fraction of what you bought brand new for.
Yep.
Let's say you spent $50,000 brand new, and now we're 10 years down the road and you're selling it for $8,000.
Yep.
Okay. That's a pretty big loss. That's a $42,000 loss. But now when you go to buy a $50,000 vehicle, you have $8,000 towards that $50,000 vehicle. Now you only have to pay $42,000 out of your pocket.
Yep.
I look at the same way for gear. Mm-hmm. I am a firm believer that when we purchase something, and my friend Jeff Abbott said this when he worked at Ada, and I'm going to reference him a lot just because me and him think a lot alike.
He's a friend of the podcast.
He's friend of the podcast. So when he would buy equipment, he would tell leadership, hey, I'm buying the soundboard today, right? Plan on me buying a new one to replace this in blank years.
Yep.
Right. I think he had like a 7-year plan.
Yeah.
And the 7-year plan for him was, I know that in 7 years, this console should still be relevant enough in the industry that someone's going to want it. Right. Maybe not everyone. Right. When the Alan Heath SQs or D-Lives came out, everyone wanted them. They were really hard to get for a little while because everyone wanted them.
Yeah.
Let's say in 7 years, right now, D-Lives are a lot easier to get. The value on the secondhand market isn't quite as good as it used to be, because they're a lot easier to get. A lot of people that wanted them now have them, so on and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. But if I was to post a D-Live for sale right now, because I wanted to just honestly replace it with the same exact console that I have.
Yeah.
Right? Just because it's 7-8 years old, right? Mm-hmm. I would be able to sell that pretty easily, pretty quickly. And probably for a decent price, right? Not enough to buy a brand new one, but like enough to offload it, right?
Yeah.
And when you start getting into those higher end consoles, like those aren't getting like updated nearly as often as the lower hand ones are.
Yeah.
But the idea of being able to recoup some of that cost, right? I had a client that had a bunch of Digicos, and I was
nice
trying
problem to have.
Yeah, I was trying to convince them because they had SD10s, and I was like, I think the 12s had come out, and the Quantum 338s had just come out, and I was like, hey, I'm like, you would really benefit from some Quantum 338s. The Quantum 225 hadn't come out yet. I was like, I think you should do Quantum 338 at front of house, and potentially look at replacing your SD10s at monitors and broadcast with either 12s or just like newer versions of what's out.
Yep.
Before your SD10s start having problems, because
before they start being unreliable.
Right. Right now, because the 338 had just come out, there was still high enough demand for the SD10 for production houses, for rentals and stuff like that, because it's a really common console.
Yeah.
I'm like, you could probably recoup from what at that time, this was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I think. Yeah, whenever the 338 just came out, which 3-4 years ago, something like that. You don't know?
No.
Okay, that's fine. I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. We were seeing SD10s being sold for, like between $15,000 and like $30,000, which is about half of what they were brand new. But you have all these rental houses that are like, I don't want to spend $65,000 on an SD10.
Yeah.
I am okay with a used one that I have to repair because a fader dies or, so on and so forth, right? Where when you're sitting in a church, you don't want to deal with replacing a fader.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the most annoying things ever. Right. Especially because it's not something you do all the time. Right. Yeah. So you're going to have to figure it out. Maybe you accidentally mess it up. Right. Even at that high of a level, and we have colleagues and friends that, have had to do that at their church.
Yeah. It's major surgery, though. If you're doing it in the church, that's major surgery on your consoles.
Right. And the thing is that SD10 is going to die. Okay. Yep. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. The church is going to replace that SD10 with most likely by time, if they just let it go until it physically dies and cannot be repaired, it will be a Quantum 338, which will be the replacement, right?
Yep.
At some point in time, you are going to buy a Quantum 338 to replace that SD10, right? And I know we're talking big, expensive consoles, but this was just a use case scenario that I saw, right? So, hey, sell this console. Try and get your $20,000 to $30,000 out of this, right?
Yep.
And then take that $20,000 or $30,000 and put it towards the $150,000 Quantum 338. You already have the stage boxes. You don't need to replace those yet. I would suggest the same thought process at some point in time. You should sell those and replace them, before they start becoming a problem.
Maybe offset them.
Yeah, don't do them all at the same time, right?
Yep.
And so now instead of $150,000, you're asking for $115,000 or $120,000, which I get that those numbers seem crazy to most people that are going to listen to this, but it's still
about scalability.
Yeah,
if you're running a digital console, you probably have a larger congregation. Right. You're servicing a larger body.
Yeah, I remember hearing one of the AV guys from Gateway Church talk about how your $100,000 budget, his $100,000 a year budget, right? When they have 30,000 members, obviously, if you have 30 members, right, your budget's probably going to be like $300 or $100, right?
Yeah,
it's a scalability thing, right?
Yep.
So it's like I buy food for 6 kids, right? My food budget's higher than you with 2 kids, right?
Right, exactly.
So it's one of those things that you have to think about that, right? Yeah. So I tried getting them to do this. Listen, this is going to happen. Yeah. And the funny thing for that client is that had already happened to them at one point in time. Oh. The original Digico consoles that they put in the building when they opened were OG, and they had all sorts of static problems and all sorts of electrical problems in the building. And they were I remember they were shocking the console with static all the time. They ended up buying static mats, but they were shocking the console, and the console was literally shutting down because of the static, because it was so bad in that room. Because again, the environment, they didn't cool it during the day, when no one was in it, because it's a big room, it's expensive, yada, yada, right?
Yeah.
So it's hey, offset that cost, right? Yep. Buy it today, right? And like Jeff said, in 7 years, I'm going to replace this. Yep. This console is still relevant. Okay. We're going to replace it so that we get to have it in a controlled replacement.
Yes.
Okay. Because with this church that I'm talking about, it died. Their main front of house console and their monitor console both died because of a power issue. Oof. Right. The building had a massive brownout or something like that. Right.
Yep.
And they were already on the fritz because of all of the issues they'd been having. Yep. Right. And I'm
sure they lost more than just the consoles too.
Oh, I'm sure at some point, somewhere else in the building, right?
Yep.
But I remember being there until 4:00 in the morning, trying to get these consoles replaced so that they could have Sunday morning service, calling in all sorts of favors, driving across the state, getting other consoles, right? So that we could function, so that we can have a functioning service for them.
Yeah. So you were scrambling. Not even the church. You as their integrator were scrambling.
Well, at the time I was actually on staff there. But our integrator was scrambling.
In-house integrator.
Yes. Well, yeah. And the integrator that we were working with was also scrambling. So yes, in that scenario. Right. So being able to go, you know what? I'm going to buy a new console before this one has major problems, and I get to schedule it, have a plan, and not have to go
release.
Yeah, I'm going to do it on Monday morning, right? It gives me 6 days to get this all squared away and working, right?
Yep.
Unless you do a Wednesday service, but still, right? You still have 3 days, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and to me, that's the biggest thing is like, it's like on a computer when you've lost a hard drive or lost files.
Yep.
You forever like, nope, a backup drive is worth the money. The backup time is worth the money. This is the same thing for me. Like have control
100%.
Of when you're upgrading your equipment, because there's honestly, I think leadership looks at that a little bit better. I think when you're in control of things, that's better stewardship, better management, and it shows to your leadership. It's also better stewardship as far as money, because hey, if you got integrated there till 4 a.m. and they're running around, like that's going to reflect on the bill.
Yeah.
And then also you have no option to shop around. You are then forced to get what you can get in that very moment.
So like in Jeff's instance, right? So their church does church a little bit different, which I think is becoming more common now, where like they only let their buildings get to a certain size and then they open another location. So like they're not just like letting one building grow and grow and grow and grow.
Right.
And so I think at this time when I talked with him about this, I think they had 3 or 4 campuses. And so he had decided that they were going to go Pro Midas consoles, right? And because they had like 5 different versions of that, right? They were able to put the scale of whatever size one they needed, right? So some had M32s, some had Pro X's, some had Pro 2s. So on and so forth. And the good thing about that was outside of the M32, all the physical pro ones, the X's and the 2s and the 3s and all that and the 1s, any of those front of house engineers from any of those campuses could go to another campus and function on the console, right? Oh, Jordan, you're sick today. Justin, can you fill in for Jordan at blah, blah campus? Sure can, right? And then he also bought a Pro 2 and stuck it on the shelf.
There you go.
Right. So he had 4 consoles installed functioning with a Pro 2, right? Which is like their more middle of the road size, right?
Yeah.
So it could replace a Pro 1 in a pinch. It could replace a Pro X in a pinch, right? And be fine. Right. And then they're not crap out of luck.
In a jam. Yeah. No, that's really smart. And I honestly, I've run multi-site churches before, and getting on the same console is huge. It's also massive for training. Because if you don't have a permanent location for one of the spots, well, hey, come on over to this other permanent location one. And we've got the same model console. So we'll just load your show files and there you go.
And then as like a TD, because usually a lot of churches that function like that have like a person that's in charge of all the campuses, right? And then individual people at each campus, right? Now you have that person only has to understand one ecosystem on the audio side, right? So it's like he no longer or she no longer has to become a master of many ecosystems.
Right.
They get to be a master of one ecosystem, right? And that's why we're seeing places like Digico and Midas and Allen and Heath do that, right?
Yeah.
I have 4 different versions of DLive. I have 4 different versions of Heritage. I have 4 different versions of Digico, right? But across those 4 versions, everything's the same. It's just size-wise, right? So it's like I could have 4 DLives deployed in the same building or across 4 campuses that are all different sizes, but I could walk up to every single one of them and know exactly how to run it because it's the exact same thing. The only difference is maybe it's on 2 screens instead of 1, or it's on 1 screen instead of 2 type thing, right?
Yeah.
But
we got to do a podcast on campuses and multi-site.
But to say all of that is that you can totally plan, right? So let's say that your console is let's go with something that's more like feasible for our listeners, like an SQ console, right? SQ consoles are, let's go with an SQ6. I think they're about $6,500, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say that console technically could probably live 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. But who knows, right?
What's the last 5 looking like?
What's the last 10 looking like?
Yeah, actually, what's more last 10 looking like?
Right. I would say that console should get replaced in 7 to 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. It should still have value, right? Unless you're buying it at the end of its life, right? Because I've seen that, right?
Yeah.
Where people bought X32s right before the Wing came out, and then they were super upset. But like SQ is like, there's no plan on replacing SQ right now, right? So that's why I'm using it. So if today in, what is this, June of 2024, you were to buy an SQ6 and, spend $6,500 on it, I would say, hey, by like 2032, you should have a new console in your hands, right? And that console should be roughly in the $6,500 range.
Yeah.
Between, and be prepared for that, right? What's inflation? Like right now, obviously we're experiencing a lot of inflation over the last couple of years. Yep. That seems like that's slowing down. So like if you plan on some 3 to 5% inflation, right, you can do that math. And anyone that does accounting for the church should be able to be prepared for that kind of stuff, because that they plan for redoing parking lots every couple of years. They plan on redoing air conditioning units every couple of years, because it always gets taken from our AV budgets, and so like, that they do that kind of stuff, right? Yep. So it's like you go to leadership and say, hey, we're going to buy this. And from my yearly budget, I really want to have $400 or $500 or $800 put aside to replace this piece of equipment, right? That's where my head goes.
See, I've never seen a church work like that as far as like putting money aside. Mm-hmm. I know they have to have some of these bigger expenses, but I just think it starts with open communication. Like Jeff said, hey, I'm buying this console now, and just a heads up, put in your calendar, in 7 years from now, I'm going to be buying another one. I'm going to need to buy another one. All along that process, you're just letting leadership know, hey, just so you know, I'm going to have this big expense. Maybe, as we talk, we're going to do another podcast about budgets. But I even have tracked stuff over years, and just knowing like, hey, in 10 years, I'm going to need a new Dream Machine, or I'm going to need a new XYZ machine. You just got to start forecasting this stuff and helping your leadership forecast costs.
There was one client that I had that did exactly what I said, and
all right, kudos to that.
They've figured out all of the major expenses, right? PA, console, and cameras, right? Those were the 3 that they landed on, right? Because lights, like you can replace a single light. It's pretty easy, right?
You're rarely replacing the whole package,
Yeah, they figured that they were going to do a big replacement in about 15 years, right? And they figured that it was going to be about $80,000. So they went to their leadership and said, hey, we want to be able to plan on spending $80,000 in about 15 years. Yeah. Can we start doing, like we have budget for all of our consumables, batteries, instrument cables, all that kind of garbage, right? Yep. That this is what we think our yearly, like we're going to have to buy / replace every year, right? Yep. This is how much money I need for that.
An operational budget.
Yep, an operational budget. And then, hey, we want to try and take, this amount of money for this big upgrade. And and they pitched a high yield savings account that was separate, that the money would go into, that was kind of operated as like an emergency fund as well. Yeah. They're like, the ultimate goal is that we're going to have to replace all this stuff. But if something crazy happens, we can come to you and say, the console, fried, right? Because it got struck by lightning, or, someone spilled a coffee on it, right? And it's out of warranty and we can't repair it because it's like the motherboard's dead, right? It's cheaper to buy a new one, right?
We've done the troubleshooting.
Right. The money is there. It's ready to go, and they can just go and buy it. Right. Yeah. And they were getting interest on it and stuff like that. And it was really interesting. And I was like, that's actually really cool, because then the burden kind of goes away for the church, right? They don't now have to come up with $80,000 to replace everything. And it's like, we know this is going to happen. And like, I think of that, and it's like, that seems crazy, but it's like, when you think about like what Dave Ramsey teaches, right? He tells you to get a $1,000 emergency fund because,
Yeah.
Your AC unit's probably going to die at some point in time. Your transmission might fall out, right? The average expense is about $1,000, right? 3 to 6 months is the ultimate goal, right? Of expenses, right? You lose your job, type thought process. And so it's like, if we do that on a personal level, why would we not do that on a business level?
Yeah.
For those type of things. Now,
I'm just hesitant because I think it really depends on your cash flow, and honestly, like,
yeah, but that means
you can, as a tech, you can go to your leadership and pitch this, but like at the end of the day, I think it's their decision and how they want to finance things.
Yeah, obviously. I mean,
I know, but it's just, I love tech guys because I think we really do have good, like, that is a great solution. That is a great idea. I wish more leadership listened to us. But
dude, people,
at the end of the day, I think you just make your case and be like,
I think
in 8 years,
I think you should pitch this. Like, even if it's not like an $80,000 thing, if it is like, hey, we need a new soundboard and it's going to cost us $7,000. Hey, I think I can hobble this, X32 together for another 3 years. Hey, leadership, I would like to put $2,500 a year away in some sort of savings account or an envelope under a mattress somewhere.
Yeah.
So that in 3 years we can buy it and there's not a giant burden. Because I know that we don't have $7,000 right now.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, I don't think that that's a crazy idea. And I think that if you like,
I'm not saying crazy. I'm just saying I could see the finance people being like, okay, yeah, you want to put the $2,500 away, but we also have these other bills we have to pay for. Right? And this is, again, this goes back to what is their finance mentality and cash flow issues. And another thing I could think about is, and this is just even to spin this a little bit, is I'm hesitant to say this, but like, what about even you as you're giving of like, hey, I'm just going to actually do that for my giving and then give a bigger gift, or find some, just saying. Your finance people may also really not like that.
I have very controversial giving like philosophies that I have come to as of late. So probably won't say it here on the podcast, but
maybe another podcast.
Maybe at some point in time. I don't have a problem with that. If that's what God's telling you to do with your money.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Look, if God's telling you to do that, you need to be doing that.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that when it comes to giving, you should not be giving just for the sake of giving. Mm-hmm. You should be giving because God is either laying something on your heart or because you're seeing a need and you're trying to fill that need.
Yep.
But filling a need can never supersede what God's telling you to do. Yep. So as long as you're on that train.
Yep. I'm a big believer in that, and I think like that's why he gives us passions and puts things on our hearts.
Yeah.
And that's why we all have different things, because those needs will hit us differently, and he knows when to utilize it. That is a whole different podcast episode. No, look, saving money aside, putting aside year after year when you know you have an upcoming expense, that's wise. That makes total sense. So I have just not worked at a church that does that, or does that with transparency.
Yeah, and let me clarify a little bit. Like with like my personal finances, right? When I started doing the Dave Ramsey plan, like I didn't just have $1,000 laying around, right? No. I had to build that up over time, right? And there were some months I was able to put $100 towards it. There were some months that was $20 towards it, right? I think that that's more so what I'm thinking. I think that that's a good practice, right? Where it's like we need $7,500 in 3 years, whatever that means monthly that we can put into there, like
the savings snowball.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, hey, this
month, you don't know, Dave Ramsey's big on the debt snowball.
Yeah. But yeah, like this month, hey, we've got $600 extra, right? Because we had a good tithing month, right?
Yeah.
Let's throw some in the AV account, right? Yeah. Because we know that that's an expense that's going to come up, right? And there's just ways that you can pitch this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I will also say this. And this is what we got to do with the thing on budgeting. I've always made friends with the finance people.
Yeah.
As a tech person, if you can work with them well, get them happy, gain their trust.
We should have Bernie Blaukamp on. to talk to him about this.
Yeah.
Because I talked to him a while back and he said he'd be more than willing to come on. And he said that he's actually got a bunch of spreadsheets for budgeting and stuff like that he'd be willing to like share with us to give to people. I think that would be great. Because I genuinely believe that this topic that we're talking about is the hardest topic to talk about because of that budgeting topic. So why don't we do another podcast about budgeting and see if we can get Bernie on?
There you go. We could do a whole series on budgeting, I feel like. Because I got some
100%
tricks and tips. So
anything else you wanted to talk about, or do you think we should wrap up? Because we've been doing this for like 50 minutes or so.
We've been doing this for a while, yeah. Our PA is now actually expired at this point. But no, yeah, the big thing is, be in communication with your finance team, be watching your gear, be monitoring it, doing maintenance, and just know it's got a shelf life. It's not going to last forever. You want to work ahead, plan ahead, to replace your gear in a controlled release way.
No one wants to drink expired milk.
Yep. And don't let your gear just sit on the shelf rotting. Like, get it in that sweet spot where you can sell it, as Justin mentioned. Like, get some value back for it. Find some use for it.
I hate seeing AV graveyards in church closets. Like, it doesn't make sense. Don't be a hoarder.
Yeah.
If you haven't used it in over a year, get rid of it.
Right.
If there's not an obvious place to put it, get rid of it.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
Trickle down effect works, right? Sanctuary gets a new board. The old board's still good. Instead of buying one for the youth room, maybe the old Sanctuary board goes to the youth room.
Yep.
There's tons of options.
Absolutely.
Buy it. The other one thing I will say with expiration dates is that sometimes people look at expiration dates as like this PA isn't going to fit our new building, and they look at that like an expiration date, and we'll just throw away this old PA. If you have genuine plans of this PA is going to be in this room for a specific amount of time, and then we're going to expand the room or build a bigger room in 5 years because we know that's going to be a thing, buy a PA that will expand with you.
Yep. Or it could be part of that plan in the future.
And be a part of that plan.
Yeah.
So don't waste money.
Don't waste that. Yep.
Be frugal. Treat it like it's coming out of your own pocket.
Yep.
That's all I care about.
Yeah. Yep. And that's stewardship. That's just
buzzword.
I know. But that's what we're called to be. Like it's not our board. It's not our PA. Newsflash. It's not yours. You manage it. You're the steward of it. Yeah. But it's the Lord's. So
Z Lord.
Big J. Yeah.
Jordo.
Okay. What did we think about yours?
You were calling me Big Red.
Big Red, yeah, but I know you didn't like that.
It's okay. Apparently my wife likes it. She's like, you're a big person and you've got red hair. It makes sense. I was like, you just don't know. You don't understand.
Oh, man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
She also calls me a derogatory term. She calls me Ginger.
I've never gotten.
If you're a redhead and you also think that ginger is a derogatory term, put it in the comments.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know if you self-identify as a ginger.
All right, this is getting out of hand. Let's wrap up. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Please rate and subscribe. We only accept 5-star reviews, like I said. And make sure you're commenting. If you don't have anything to comment from anything we've talked about, just comment like your favorite car or your truck.
Or candy.
Or planet, or color or whatever. It helps the algorithm. Guys, we are also almost to 1,000 subscribers, so we really do appreciate that. If you can share the word, share this podcast with a friend that maybe is thinking about joining the AV team or they're struggling with this topic, get this to them. You can also we answer every comment as of right now until we get a little bigger. If you're watching this in 10 years, when we have 10 million subscribers, we might not be answering every single one, but I really have a hard time believing we'll have 10 million subscribers because, this is kind of a miche market. So, I mean,
if we have 10 million subscribers, we will have time because we won't be working anywhere.
We'll just be doing this. We'll just be sitting in these chairs talking.
We'll have an intern.
We'll have an intern answering them.
Paid intern.
I don't know, man.
Hopefully.
I don't know. Interns shouldn't get paid. That's another topic. Let's get out of here. Thanks so much. Don't forget to subscribe.